The pawn shop on Garrison Avenue had seen a lot of heartbreak walk through its doors. But Terence Okonkwo had never forgotten the woman with the wedding ring. She was small, maybe 5'2", wearing a coat too thin for 19-degree February, hands shaking as she placed a simple gold band with a modest diamond on the counter, tears sliding down her cheeks as the pawnbroker offered $400 for a ring worth $2,000. A ring her husband had given her 14 years ago. A ring she was selling because he had died 7 months prior. And the medical bills had taken everything, and the electric company was shutting off the power tomorrow. And it was supposed to be 12 degrees, and she had 2 kids, and she had no other choice. What happened after Terence followed her into the frozen parking lot, after his club wired the money within an hour, after he walked back into that pawn shop and paid $650 to buy back what should never have been sold, and after the Sovereign Kings quietly rewired her dangerous house and untangled her stalled insurance and helped her kids believe in miracles again, prove that a wedding ring is worth infinitely more than gold, that some strangers become family the moment they decide to care, and that the chain of kindness only works when someone refuses to let it break. It was a Tuesday in February, 2:47 p.m., and the temperature outside had dropped to 19 degrees. Terence was 54 years old, a retired master sergeant who had served 22 years in the Army before trading combat boots for a Harley-Davidson and a leather vest bearing the patches of the Sovereign King's MC. He had stopped at Hoffman's Pawn and Gold to sell an old watch his ex-wife had given him, a piece he no longer wanted cluttering his dresser drawer. The woman ahead of him in line was small, maybe 5'2", wearing a coat too thin for February in Missouri. Her hands shook as she placed something on the counter, and even from 6 feet away, Terence could see the tears sliding silently down her cheeks. The pawnbroker, a heavy man with glasses and a permanent frown, examined what she had given him through a jeweler's loupe. "I can give you $400, he said. The woman's voice cracked. "It's worth at least $2,000. "The diamond alone." $400, the pawnbroker repeated. "Take it or leave it." Terence stepped closer, not to interfere, just to see. On the counter sat a wedding ring, a simple gold band with a modest diamond that caught the fluorescent light and threw tiny rainbows across the scratched glass display case. The woman's hands were still shaking. She was maybe 45, with dark circles under her eyes, and the hollowed-out look of someone who had not slept properly in months. She wore no other jewelry. Her coat had a patched elbow. Her shoes were held together with something that looked like electrical tape. "Please," she whispered, "I need at least $600. The electric company is shutting off the power tomorrow. I have 2 kids. It's supposed to be 12 degrees tomorrow night." The pawnbroker shrugged. $400. That's the offer. The woman stood frozen, caught between 2 impossible choices. Terence watched her face cycle through grief, desperation, and finally a resignation so complete it made his chest hurt. "Fine," she said. $400. She signed the paperwork with a hand that would not stop trembling. The pawnbroker counted out $20 bills. $400 for a ring that had probably cost 5 times that much. A ring that meant infinitely more. She took the money and walked toward the door without looking back. Terence watched her go. Then he made a decision. He caught up with her in the parking lot, moving carefully so he would not frighten her. A large black man in a leather vest, approaching a lone woman in an empty parking lot. He knew how that could look. He kept his hands visible, his posture non-threatening, his voice gentle. "Ma'am," he called out. "Excuse me, ma'am." She spun around, clutching her purse against her chest, eyes wide with fear that softened slightly when she saw him keeping his distance. "I'm sorry to bother you," Terence said. "I was in line behind you. I saw what happened with the ring." Her face crumpled. Please, I can't. I just need to get home to my kids. I understand. I just wanted to ask. That ring. Was it your wedding ring? She nodded, fresh tears spilling over. 14 years. My husband gave it to me 14 years ago. He died 7 months ago. Cancer. And now I'm selling his ring to keep the lights on because the medical bills took everything and I can't. She could not finish. She stood in the frozen parking lot, 19 degrees, thin coat sobbing into her hands while a stranger in a leather vest watched helplessly. Terrence made another decision. Hit subscribe if you believe that some treasures cannot be measured in dollars. Comment the name of your city and share this with someone who needs to know that help sometimes appears exactly when all hope seems lost. What's your name? Terrence asked gently. Colleen, she managed. Colleen Whitfield. Colleen, I'm Terrence. I'm going to ask you something that might sound strange, but I need you to trust me for just a minute. Can you do that? She looked at him, really looked, taking in the leather vest, the patches, the face that had seen combat and loss, and things that left scars invisible to the eye. Something in his expression must have convinced her, because she nodded. I want to help you, Terrence said, not with strings attached, not with expectations. I've been where you are. Not exactly, but close enough. I know what it feels like to lose everything that matters and have to choose between your pride and your survival. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his wallet. How much do you need to catch up on everything? Electric, gas, whatever else is behind. How much? Colleen shook her head. I can't accept money from a stranger. Just sold my wedding ring. I have the 400. That's enough for the electric bill and maybe... How much? Terrence repeated. To really be okay. Not just surviving for another month, but actually okay. Colleen was quiet for a long moment. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, 2,300. That's what's behind. Electric, gas, the water bill, the credit card I used to buy groceries when the life insurance got tied up in probate. $2,300, and I could start over. But I don't have $2,300. I have $400 in a house that's going to be freezing by Thursday. Terrence nodded slowly. He counted the cash in his wallet. $340. Not nearly enough, but he knew people who had more. He pulled out his phone. The Sovereign King's MC had a fund. It was not something they advertised, not something outsiders knew about. But for 19 years, every member had contributed a portion of their earnings to a pool, reserved for exactly these situations. People in crisis. People who had nowhere else to turn. People the system had failed. Terrence called his club president, a man named Desmond Achebe, who had built the Sovereign Kings from a handful of veterans into one of the most respected clubs in the Midwest. He explained the situation, the woman, the ring, the kids, the 12-degree night coming Thursday. Desmond listened without interrupting. When Terrence finished, Desmond asked one question. What do you need? 2,300 to clear her debts. And I want to buy that ring back. Whatever Hoffman is asking. Done, Desmond said. I'll have the money wired to your account within the hour. And Terrence? Good catch. This is what we're here for. Colleen was still standing in the parking lot when Terrence hung up the phone. She had not moved. Her thin coat was doing nothing against the February wind, and her lips were starting to turn blue. Terrence walked her to his motorcycle, unstrapped the extra helmet he always carried, and handed her his jacket. I'm taking you to get coffee, he said. Somewhere warm. We need to talk, and you need to stop freezing. She hesitated. I should get home. The kids, how old? 12 and 9, she said. A girl and a boy. They're at school for another 2 hours. Then you have time for coffee. She looked at the motorcycle, at the helmet, at the man who was offering both. Why are you doing this? Terrence smiled. Because someone did it for me once. Because that ring on Hoffman's counter represents something that should not have a price tag. Because your husband gave you that ring 14 years ago and promised to take care of you. And I'm guessing he's real unhappy right now that circumstances are forcing you to give it up. Colleen's face crumpled again, but this time she was almost laughing through the tears. He would be furious, she said. He was so proud. Never wanted to ask anyone for anything. It drove me crazy sometimes. Then let me do what he can't, Terrence said. Let me help you keep that promise he made. If you're enjoying this story, hit that hype button right now. It's free, takes a second, and helps this video reach more people who need to see it. Now back to the story. They rode to a diner 3 blocks away, a place with cracked vinyl booths and bottomless coffee that cost $1.50. Colleen wrapped her hands around the mug like it was the most precious thing she had ever held. She told Terrence her story. Patrick Whitfield had been her husband for 14 years, her best friend for 20, high school sweethearts who had grown up together, married young, built a life in the small house on Maple Street that Patrick's grandmother had left them. He worked construction. She worked part-time at the library. They had 2 kids, a mortgage they could just barely afford, and a happiness that did not require money to sustain. Then Patrick got sick. It started with a cough that would not go away. By the time they found the tumor, it had spread. 6 months of treatments that insurance covered partially, then not at all. Medical bills that piled up faster than they could be paid. Patrick fighting until the last moment, more worried about leaving Colleen with debt than about his own pain. He died in July. The life insurance, which should have provided for the family, got tangled in paperwork and bureaucracy. The bills kept coming. The mortgage came due. The utilities threatened shutoff. Colleen sold everything she could. The truck Patrick had loved, the tools he had collected over 20 years of construction work, the furniture they had bought together when they first moved in. The wedding ring was the last thing she had left of him, and now it was sitting in a pawn shop display case, waiting to be sold to someone who would never know what it meant. Terrence listened to all of it without interrupting. When she finished, he set down his coffee cup and looked at her with eyes that held their own history of loss. I was married. Yince, he said. Army wife. She stuck with me through 3 deployments, through the nightmares when I came back, through the adjustment to civilian life that almost broke us both. Then one day she said she was done. Just like that. 20 years. And she was done. Colleen winced. I'm sorry, don't be. Point is, I understand what that ring means. It's not about the gold or the diamond. It's about the promise, the years, the person who put it on your finger and meant every word of the vows. He reached across the table and took her hand. I'm going to buy that ring back, Colleen. Today, before Hoffman can sell it to anyone else. And I'm going to clear your debts so you can stop drowning and start breathing again. Colleen pulled her hand away. I can't let you do that. You don't even know me. No, Terrence agreed. But I know what it looks like when someone has given up everything and is about to give up hope. I've seen it in the mirror. And I know that sometimes the only thing standing between survival and disaster is one person who decides to give a damn. If Bike Diaries has become part of your week, consider joining the channel membership. Just a couple bucks a month keeps these stories coming. Links below. And hit that hype button if you haven't already. Now back to the story. They returned to Hoffman's Pawn and Gold at 4:23 p.m. The pawnbroker remembered Colleen. His eyebrows rose when he saw her walk back in with a large black man in a leather vest, but he said nothing, just waited. Terrence approached the counter. The wedding ring you bought this afternoon. I want to buy it back. The pawnbroker's frown deepened. Already processed. It's inventory now. If you want to purchase it, it's $650. You gave her $400, Terrence said evenly. 3 hours ago. And now it's inventory. $650. Terrence felt the familiar anger rising in his chest, the same anger that had gotten him through 3 deployments and nearly destroyed his marriage. He breathed through it. This was not a battlefield. This was a pawn shop, run by a man who profited from desperation. $650, Terrence said. Fine. He pulled out the cash Desmond had wired, counted out $650, and laid it on the counter. The pawnbroker took his time retrieving the ring, making a show of checking paperwork that did not need checking, enjoying the small power he held over people who had no other options. Finally, he placed the ring on the counter. Terrence picked it up. It was warm from being under the display lights, a simple gold band with a diamond that had probably cost Patrick Whitfield 2 months' salary, maybe more. He turned to Colleen. "This belongs to you," he said, placing it in her palm. Colleen stared at the ring like she was seeing a ghost. Her fingers closed around it, and she brought it to her chest, pressing it against her heart. She did not say thank you. She did not need to. The tears streaming down her face said everything. The Sovereign Kings did not stop with the ring. Over the following weeks, they quietly inserted themselves into Colleen Whitfield's life, not as saviors, but as support. Desmond arranged for the club's accountant to help untangle the life insurance paperwork that had been stalled for 7 months. Within 3 weeks, the check finally arrived, enough to pay off the medical debt and put a cushion in the bank. A brother named Winston, who worked as an electrician, inspected Colleen's house and found wiring so old it was a fire hazard. He returned the following weekend with 3 other Sovereign Kings, and they rewired the entire house in 2 days, refusing any payment. Another brother, Kwame, owned a car dealership. When Colleen's ancient Honda finally died in March, he sold her a reliable used Civic for $1,000, less than cost, with a payment plan she could actually afford. The kids, Maisie and Owen, were suspicious at first. Strange men in leather vests showing up to help their mother. It felt too good to be true. But Terrence was patient. He showed up for school events, helped Owen with his science project, taught Maisie how to change a tire when she expressed interest in learning to drive. By summer, the Whitfield family had gone from the edge of collapse to something resembling stability. The house was safe. The bills were paid. The life insurance had finally come through. And Colleen wore her wedding ring every single day, never taking it off, a reminder of the husband she had lost and the stranger who had refused to let her lose everything else. The town of Hartwell noticed the changes. At first, the gossip was predictable. The widow was running with bikers now. The widow had found a new man. The widow had clearly lost her mind from grief. But the gossip faded when people saw what was actually happening. The Sovereign Kings were not taking advantage of Colleen. They were lifting her up. They were showing up for her kids. They were doing the work that neighbors and friends and family should have been doing all along, but had been too busy, too distracted, too uncomfortable with grief to manage. Slowly, other people in Hartwell began asking the Sovereign Kings for help. A single father, whose wife had left him with 3 kids and no child support. An elderly woman whose roof leaked every time it rained. A teenager who needed a suit for a job interview and had no way to get one. The club responded to each request the way they had responded to Colleen. Quietly, efficiently, without expectation of recognition or reward. By the end of the year, the Sovereign Kings had become something unexpected in Hartwell. Not a motorcycle gang, not a source of fear, but a safety net, a community resource, a group of men who had decided that protecting their own meant protecting everyone who needed protection. Terrence became the unofficial liaison between the club and the town. He sat on the library board at Colleen's invitation. He volunteered at the elementary school. He organized a toy drive at Christmas that collected more donations than any previous year. And every time someone thanked him, he said the same thing. Don't thank me. Pass it forward. That's how this works. 1 year after the day in the pawn shop, Colleen invited Terrence to dinner. It was not a date. She was not ready for that, might never be ready for that, and Terrence had never pushed for anything beyond friendship. But she wanted to mark the anniversary, to acknowledge what he had done, to say the words she had never properly said. They sat on her back porch after the kids had gone to bed, watching fireflies dance in the warm June air. "I need to tell you something," Colleen said. Terrence waited. "The day you found me in that parking lot, I had already decided. If selling the ring didn't work, if I couldn't keep the lights on, I was going to send the kids to my sister's and just stop. Stop fighting. Stop trying. Stop existing." Terrence's heart clenched. He had suspected, had seen it in her eyes that day. But hearing it confirmed was different. "I'm glad you didn't," he said quietly. "Me too." Colleen turned her wedding ring on her finger, the ring Terrence had bought back, the ring that had almost been lost forever. "Patrick used to say that God puts people in our path for a reason. I never really believed it until you walked into that pawn shop." "I'm not much of a believer myself," Terrence admitted, "but I believe in this. In showing up when people need you. In doing the thing that needs to be done, even when it's not your problem." "Why, though?" Colleen asked. "You didn't know me. You had no reason to care. Why did you?" Terrence was quiet for a long moment, listening to the crickets, watching the fireflies, remembering. "Because when I got back from my 3rd deployment," he said finally, "I was broken. PTSD, nightmares, anger I couldn't control. I pushed everyone away, my wife, my kids, my family. I ended up homeless for 8 months, living in my truck, too proud to ask for help." Colleen's hand found his. "A man found me one night," Terrence continued, "sleeping in a Walmart parking lot. He was a sovereign king. Name was Roosevelt. Big man, bigger heart. He didn't ask if I wanted help. He just told me to get in his truck. Took me home. Fed me. Let me sleep in a real bed for the first time in months. Then he introduced me to the club." Terrence smiled at the memory. "Roosevelt died 3 years ago. Heart attack. But before he went, he made me promise something. He said, 'Every life you save, that's me saving you again. Every person you help, that's the debt being paid forward. Don't you ever stop.'" He looked at Colleen. "So I don't stop. I can't. Because Roosevelt saved me so that I could save others. And you're going to save someone too, someday. That's how the chain works. That's how we survive. Thank you for watching this story about a woman who sold her wedding ring to keep the lights on, and the biker who bought it back and helped her family rebuild from nothing. It was inspired by the real widows and single parents who face impossible financial choices every day, and the strangers who step in when systems fail. If you are struggling with bills, with grief, with the overwhelming weight of trying to survive alone, please know that help exists. The 211 helpline connects you with local resources for utilities, food, housing, and more. The National Widowers Organization provides support for those navigating loss. You do not have to sell everything you love to survive. Subscribe to Bike Diaries. Hit that hype button to boost this video. And if you want to support what we do, The membership link is below. Share this with everyone who needs to remember that a wedding ring is more than gold and diamond, that some debts are paid forward instead of paid back, and that sometimes the stranger in the parking lot is exactly the miracle you need. Colleen Whitfield is 48 now. She works full-time at the library where she once worked part-time, managing the children's section and running a grief support group for young widows. She still wears Patrick's ring every day. She is never remarried and says she may never be ready, but she has a family now, a strange, wonderful, leather-clad family who showed up when she had nothing left. Maisie is 16 and learning to ride a motorcycle, much to her mother's mixed feelings. Owen is 13 and wants to be an electrician like Winston. Both of them call Terrence Uncle T and cannot imagine life without the Sovereign Kings. Terrence Okonkwo is 57. He still rides with the Sovereign Kings, still volunteers at the library, still shows up whenever someone in Hartwell needs help. He keeps a photograph in his wallet of Roosevelt, the man who saved him, next to a photograph of Colleen and her kids, the family he helped save in return. The ring that almost got lost forever now sits on Colleen's finger, where it has always belonged. Some things cannot be measured in dollars. Some debts can only be paid forward, and some strangers become family the moment they decide to give a damn.